Are you curious about bodies, pleasure, and possibilities? And what about curious about what others are up to on the planet when it comes to pleasure, sex, and play? Have you considered what pleasure can do for your life, your body, and your bank account? Do you know something magical, delightful, and out of this world orgasmic is not only possible for you, but totally available to you? If you're ready to be the magical, sexual, sexy beast you know you can be, and you just need the tools to get there, you're in the right place. Now, here's the host of The Pleasure Zone, sensual movement artist, relationship and sex alchemist, Milica Jelenic.
Well, welcome, my sweet pleasure seekers. Today we are going to have a very important conversation all about intimacy. What is it? Why are people afraid of it? What's that all about? So we will be diving into that shortly. For those of you who are brand new to this station, I am Milica Jelenic, and this is the Pleasure Zone, where we talk about all things about bodies, relationships, from things like all the way from traumas to kinks to history, sociology, psychology, anthropology, you name it, we dive in. And I am in the 9th season of this show. So you can, if you like the show and you're like, hey, that's interesting, you can go back and listen to well over 400 episodes. You can also watch well over probably 200 or 300 episodes, 200 episodes, hard to say. We started out with audio and then we kept on adding. So if you are interested in things, and if you are looking through the list of different shows I have, and there are things that you're looking for in particular and you can't find it, just send me a message. And I would love to be able to talk on the topic that you are looking for. How do you do that? You're going to head over to my website, milicajelenic.com. That's milicajelenic.com. Send me a message. Let me know what you're interested in. Also, if you have listened to this show or any other shows, let me know what show you listened to, and if it had any impact for you, if you learned anything, if it helped you, if you have things to add. Maybe you're an expert too, and you wanted to add some information. I would love to hear from you. So, what are we talking about today? We're talking about that big question: is it normal to be scared of intimacy? And I love talking about these topics because my field of expertise is working with people I work holistically with people for their health. And one of the things that often comes up as part of the holistic approach to health is looking at people's way of having relationship with others, but also with themselves and their bodies. So intimacy is big for me in the work that I do. And intimacy is also big, as I'm also a sex and intimacy coach. So all of this work leads to the big question of how, if we are scared of intimacy, how that affects our lives. What can that do? Why do we have that? What's going on? So in my practice, one of the questions that I do get from people is, kind of on the side, quietly, people are like, is it normal to be scared of intimacy? And intimacy in this case is the broad term. Now, the broad term of relationship and being close to somebody, that is the intimacy. Now, if you think of the word intimacy, it sounds phonetically like into me, seeing into yourself. It's kind of an interesting phonetic experience with the word. That is not actually the etymology of the word, but it does have a fun sound and feeling with that. So when we look at being scared of intimacy, it doesn't necessarily mean scared of having any kind of sexual intercourse or anything like that. It has to do with being close to somebody. You might have fear of intimacy, but you actually really like to have sex. That is kind of a separate situation. So in this case, when we're looking at intimacy, is how close are we willing to be to our own selves first and to another person? And is it normal to be scared of being close to yourself and close to another person? So in this case, normal is kind of a very subjective word. So when we look at intimacy and what could cause fear of intimacy, there are some things that I would not consider normal. Like, I don't consider child sexual abuse normal, but that is something that leads to a fear of intimacy, or abandonment, or death, or any of the things that can lead to a fear of intimacy. They're not normal experiences. They are common, but they certainly don't make people feel normal. So to me, when we use that word normal, is, do you feel okay with yourself? And a lot of times these experiences that lead to not feeling normal are very much experiences that are, highly traumatic, and also highly common. So with some people having a fear of intimacy because of different traumas at different stages in their life, the question is it normal to be traumatized? No, but it is incredibly common. So we're going to look briefly at some different things that can impact why we have a fear of intimacy. There are experts on certain there's a certain way of looking at relationships that are attachment styles. And there's a lot of information out there if you look at attachment styles, and we might even have a little time to look at attachment styles in this episode as well. But the target is to look at how abuse and trauma, from trauma that could be physical, sexual, or emotional abuse, how that might affect your intimacy and your choice of having intimacy or not having intimacy. The lack of bonding in early childhood, which is part of the attachment styles work. So we'll see how much we can dive into that. Separation anxiety, which also has a little bit to do with the idea of the different styles of bonding. Fear of being dominated. Low self-esteem is another one, which can often come from the different ways when you're raised, how you were taught to be with yourself and around others. And then primal trust. I know that word sounds really cool, and I really like that term. I came across it recently as being coined as primal trust, but it is something that I think when you hear it, you're like, primal trust just makes sense, as it is the trust that we have in ourselves that we will both survive and be able to not just be survivors, but thrivers. So it's all the things that we might, if you have a fear and you're walking around all the time, like, I don't know if I can do this, and you have that fear every day, you might not have that primal trust, that trust in that you will survive and you will thrive. And these are all things you can develop for sure over time. And sometimes you might think you don't have it, but then if you look, you can find evidence that you actually do trust and you do have primal trust. So we will look at some of those things. And yes, there are other people who talk about primal trust in other ways. So not everybody who talks about primal trust will be referring to it in the way that I'm referring to it tonight. You might have a different feeling about what is primal trust. So feel free to go with whatever is true for you. So let's look at why maybe trauma would have an impact on why you might be scared of intimacy. Let's create a scenario here. So here you are, maybe a 3 or 4-year-old child, and you are, playing around, and maybe you break something in the house, and you didn't break it on purpose. Maybe a glass, like that happens. It's really common. You break a drinking glass on the floor. It's all cracked and broken, and you're scared, and you might not even know. You might not have even seen a glass broken before. And so you're standing there, and you might just be curious at first, but then when when somebody comes in, like an adult or somebody comes in and sees this broken glass, you might get spanked for breaking the glass. Now that would be a physical trauma, and it might be a little shocking that you didn't even know it was a problem to have the glass break. It's not like a baby would instinctively know that breaking a glass would upset somebody. And the reaction, whether it's the levels of reaction too, can indicate how stressed a person is as well. If you're having a reaction that's like life or death reaction to a broken glass, then you need to kind of take a moment, sit back and check yourself about what's going on with you that has you react so extremely to such a sort of, we could call it and not as significant scenario. I mean, if the glass was, handed down for 500 generations and it's worth $35,000, yes, you may feel upset. If it's that glass from the dollar store and you put $1.25 into it and you're making an average income of $50,000 a year and you can easily replace that glass, it might not be so angering to you. So, I mean, I remember as a kid not drinking milk and being like yelled at, right? Like, and it's that it wasn't, I know that my parents were incredibly stressed. My parents were also separated. They separated when I was 4. So for me to have the experience of 2 parents in 2 different homes with 2 different parenting styles, never really knowing how to like gauge, how to act with this parent, how do I act with this parent. It was very different in both homes. And the reaction to not drinking milk in one home was very different to a reaction of not drinking milk in another home. And you didn't really know what the reactions were going to be. So it was tricky to navigate. And it actually took me a really long time to be able to develop an attachment style that didn't just involve me running away, avoidant, and getting more into a secure attachment style. So these are things that even though we have them, they can, over time, we can adapt and change and choose differently. And attachment styles in general, they just play a role in the way we approach and experience all kinds of intimacy, whether it's the conversation or whether it's sex itself. So a lot of times when it comes to sex as that aspect of intimacy, people who have secure attachment styles can find their sex life quite fulfilling, where insecure attachment styles, where people are anxious and preoccupied or dismissive and avoidant or even disorganized, they can have less satisfactory sex. They might have more casual sex but less satisfactory sex. So secure attachment styles can really be helpful in having a more satisfying sex life. So all the more reason to work towards feeling secure. Where? In yourself first, and then you can bring it into your relationship. This is not something that necessarily happens overnight. In fact, if you do have radical shifts, which is cool when you can have some radical shifts, but as long as they're sustainable. So it's something that if you do create a change, that you have a sustainable change where when you might have like an aha moment, then you go, oh, okay, I had that change and that's really comfortable. I really like that. I can keep choosing into this. I can feel more secure. Oh, excellent. I feel more secure. And it's on a daily basis. Then it's sustainable. Otherwise, it can be like just like a Pop-Tart moment. You get it fast, you go through it, and then you're like, well, that's done. And next, it's not a sustainable change. Like, I don't know why I said Pop-Tarts, but I was watching a movie. I was watching The Sixth Sense last night, and the kid wanted Pop-Tarts, and that's probably why I'm thinking about Pop-Tarts. And in the movie, actually, The Sixth Sense, you can actually see how as the child develops more of a secure attachment with the main character, Bruce Willis's character, as he gets more connected to that character, the more secure he feels and the more he's able to articulate with his words what's going on and to be able to deal with the things that scare him. His relationship with his mother also changes, and then he starts to feel more secure by the end of the movie. He feels more confident and secure. So we do know that this is possible to change these things. So why would we change them? Why not? If we can change these things and let our bodies let go of the trauma that have caused these different attachment styles, we can let go of the trauma that has us feel insecure or avoidant or any of that. And it could lead to a better relationship. Would you not look at the ways to be able to do that? And would you not choose to be able to step into that? And maybe you wouldn't. Maybe you're like, it's not worth the effort. I like being avoidant and it's my thing. I'm turned on by being avoidant. Cool. But if you aren't turned on by it and somewhere in your heart, you're like, I know I'm avoidant, and at the same time, I would like to have A, B, C, and D. how do I reconcile these things that are very opposition to each other, very much in opposition to each other? So there are ways to do that. So we will talk more about these different reasons why we might be scared of intimacy and some ideas on how to start to move forward. So we'll talk about that when we come back from this commercial break. You're listening to The Pleasure Zone here on Inspired Choices Network, and we'll be right back after this commercial.
Are you secretly a voyeur, wondering what's going on in other people's sex lives? What if now is the time for a totally different sexual evolution? Are you interested in people who are pioneers of different sexual and pleasurable practices? Lean in now with Milica Jelenic, where she will entice you and your body to know your own pleasure zone. On the Pleasure Zone radio show with sensual movement artist Milica Jelenic, you'll receive tools, inspiration, and a foundation to allow yourself to receive more in your sex life, and quite possibly other areas of your life as well. Listen for The Pleasure Zone with Milica every Monday at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, 7 p.m. Central Time, 6 p.m. Mountain Time, and 5 p.m. Pacific Time on InspiredChoicesNetwork.com.
Are you a subject matter expert? Are you here to share your expertise with an audience waiting to hear from you in only the way you can deliver? Are you ready to have your voice amplified across the airwaves? Inspired Choices Network has a global radio platform streaming to millions of people across the world. Professionally produced and supported by an accomplished team every step of the way, you can broadcast from anywhere in the world, knowing your voice matters, and we ensure it is delivered with ease and efficiency. Eager to hear your message, the world awaits. Contact us today to become an Inspired Choices Network radio host. Email become a host at inspiredchoicesnetwork.com.
This is The Pleasure Zone with sensual movement artist Milica Jelenic. To participate in the program today, join our live studio audience in our chat room at inspiredchoicesnetwork.com. You can also make the choice to ask or comment by email, info@milicajelenic.com. Now, back to the program.
Welcome back, my sweet, sweet pleasure seeker. So just before break, I kind of tapped into some words that might be, maybe they're not familiar for all the listeners. And I was talking about the attachment styles and how different attachment styles can have an impact on how we relate with intimacy and how you might have fear of intimacy and where that might come from, and whether there's been abuse or neglect or anything like that. So some of the things to look at for yourself are, when you were little, did adults respond to you quite quickly, sensitively, consistently with, I'll give you an example in our house right now. So my kid is 15, and as a baby, there was, I was very consistent with when Ziva cried, I would go and hold Ziva. And it was as quick as I could get there. So whether it was quick to their awareness or not, it was like as fast as I could get there. If I was on the toilet going to pee, I was going to get there and be there for them, hold them, do whatever I needed to do. Whether it was move them or whatever it was, I would check on all the things. So part of that can help create a sort of sense of security. Now, at some point too, if other people don't respond and only the mother does respond, now this is only my theory because I'm looking at my own life, but I was the main person responding to crying, was that there's a secure attachment to me. However, Ziva doesn't have a secure attachment to other people. So there can be, there are a very few handful of people that there's a secure attachment for Ziva. So for me, my mother was not quick to respond. My mom was distant. My mom was often disengaged. So my mom had an avoidant attachment style. So for me, growing up, what I started to believe was that probably my needs won't be met. And then how does that play out in relationship? So how that plays out in relationship later on is that I could be in a relationship and not feel like I can ask for what I require because I have a subconscious belief that no matter what I ask for, I'm not going to have it delivered anyway. It doesn't matter why I ask for it because nobody's going to give me what I want. And that belief translated not only to people, it translated to like my ability to manifest, to actualize, to create in my life, because I had this subconscious belief that, well, if my needs can't be met, then, you know, then who's going to want to be my client? Who's going to like, so this went on for a number of years. There was this subconscious thing like nagging that was like, well, you probably aren't going to succeed, right? And so my mom also had a little bit of between avoidant attachment, there was also a little bit of ambivalent. So you'll probably find when you go to do your own research on attachment styles, there's a lot of different words and combinations out there of different words. So I'm just going to work with the four that I'm familiar with. So secure, avoidant, attached. So secure attachment, avoidant attachment, ambivalent attachment, and disorganized attachment. So there are different names for those, but I'm just going to stick with those for today. So let's look at if you were a child and you had broken that cup, and out of nowhere the parent comes in and, you know, spanks you. That response is an extreme and erratic response. So what that would do would have, if you were the kid who broke that glass and your parent came in and spanked you and you didn't even know why, because the glass just fell out of your hand and you never broke a glass before, so you didn't know what happened and you didn't know they would be upset about it. And instead of explaining things to you, going, hey, that glass is something that, you know, I had to work for and I paid for that and we need this to drink out of, and it helps me drink easier because I need water to live. You know, you can actually be pretty reasonable with kids when they have language and they understand survival needs. You can explain things in pretty simple ways and they will get it, and you can show them, you know. So everybody learns in different ways. Some people need to be spoken to, some people need to read it, some people need demonstrations. So you could show them, you know, an option instead of yelling at the person and being erratic would be to show them, hey, so you know when you broke my glass, it was like this. It was like if I took your toy and threw it down the toilet and you never got to have it again, how would you feel? Now, depending on some kids actually have they're so disconnected that they actually don't have a feeling to any of that, and they can be quite ambivalent, like, it doesn't matter. And they don't even care because they don't even believe that their needs will ever be met anyway. So you might as well, you want to take my stuff and destroy it, whatever. I don't even think I'll ever have anything I need, right? So there is a lot of stuff that can happen. Now, there are stats out there about how many people in the world have certain attachment styles. I don't think the stats are accurate because there is, I mean, these stats are just based on a small number of people who are being interviewed, and a lot of the times people who are being interviewed would fall under certain categories of attachment style because they're looking for resolutions and they're looking to create some certain changes. They wouldn't be avoidant, right? They would probably be looking, they'd probably be more secure in some things, but maybe not in all things. So you can have combinations of these as well. And, you know, you could be secure or you could be insecure. You could be very responsive, highly responsive, or highly avoidant. Anyway, there's all these combinations. So we're starting with these four main ones and how they can affect the way that you are intimate. So if you have been feeling your whole life like nobody's going to respond to you, would you choose to be in a relationship? Would you choose to break down your barriers, let down your guard, and let somebody in? Or would you just put up your guard and go, yeah, you know what? can't even like deal with you because you're probably not even gonna meet my needs anyway. I can try and I can try, but you're probably not going to meet my needs anyway. And if a person can't rely on you meeting their needs, so as an adult, if you feel like people are like, I can't rely on you to meet my needs, then there's something that you're showing them, that you're being inconsistent, or sometimes being like overly sensitive, or sometimes being neglectful, not even knowing or paying attention. So if there's these things like inconsistency, insensitivity, or overly sensitive, or any of that going on, then your partner or your potential partner, if you're in a relationship with a person who's trying intimacy, but they have, fear of intimacy, they are not going to be able to rely on you to have their needs met. So consistency for somebody who has an ambivalent attachment, it's really important to show them consistency. So for me, who had a mom who was quite ambivalent, having a partner who's not only consistent, is completely predictable, is so helpful for me. And it actually helps me feel really secure. Some people would need, I'm much more spontaneous and much more maybe inconsistent would be the word. And my partner is much more consistent. So say, for example, if I want to go somewhere and I'm like, hey, I'm going here, do you want to come with me, Mike? And Mike's like, and it's like in a day or two, and Mike will go, yeah, sure, I'll come with you. I know that consistently, that probably 90 out of 100 times Mike will cancel. And I can actually rest assured know that he'll probably cancel. It's more surprising to me when he's not consistent in canceling and that he shows up. So it's funny because I can actually rely on that. I can rely on that about him. And it's not about him trying to meet my needs of going out. It's that I can rely on the fact that I know him and I know his consistencies. And that is having a need met for me. So it's not that he's fulfilling, like I have a hole somewhere that needs to be filled, but he's showing me consistency in the way that he acts and behaves. And I can count on that, which is awesome. So if you happen to be in a relationship with somebody and you're like, hey, feel like you're like really ambivalent and don't care about stuff, or you're inconsistent and like super sensitive, and maybe you don't seem to care. If they've been doing that consistently, if they've been doing that like all the time, that's a consistency that you can like rely on, if you know what I mean. So the more you can rely on certain behaviors, the more you can actually rely on trusting yourself to know what that person may or may not do. And it doesn't mean that you're in, that you should become a doormat and like let somebody walk all over you because you can rely on that you're never going to show up. If it matters to you that they show up, then you need to have the conversation that it matters to you. Does it matter to me if my husband goes grocery shopping with me? No. If it did, I would say to him, you know what? This is something I'd really like to do together. I'd like us to be able to go out, find some deals. If you can help me carry stuff, if you can do A, B, C, and D, that would be super helpful. It's not my most fun job in the world. So can you do it with me? So I will, if I do need somebody to go grocery shopping with me and my husband doesn't want to, I will call other people. I know that I can count on that I could ask my kid, ask my mother, ask somebody else in the neighborhood, hey, do you want to go with me? So for me, I know that I'm much more productive when I do things with other people. I like attachment and I like collaboration and co-creation. So I've grown to really like intimacy, where when I was a kid, I didn't really understand relationships with anybody at all. I didn't get how people loved each other. When people would say, I love you, I was like, what does that even mean? I guess I love you because you said you love me. So even growing up as a teenager, it was like if somebody said they loved me, I was like, well, I guess I love you too, because I don't know what is love. And I might even say it first to see, like if I said, I love you, I might say it and go, I love you, just to see how they would react, to see. And it wasn't like a trick. It was like, If I say I love you and you say I love you, then what is this feeling? Like, what are we experiencing? Like, what is love? The love thing still has me baffled to this day, still like really tapping in to figure out what is love. And yes, there are the 5 love languages, which was amazingly helpful in learning about love. And there are different theories on love. And like the Greeks have the 4 kinds of love, or 3 or 4 kinds of love. So having these things can be super helpful. Having information to learn about ourselves can be helpful. Knowing different attachment styles can be helpful, and being able to figure out what your fear of intimacy is. Where did it come from? Was it because you were randomly hit by, a parent and you're like, I don't know why, everything I did, it was inconsistent. One day I put away my shoes this way and it was fine. The next day I put them away and my mom slapped me for it. My mom didn't slap me for that. My mom was ambivalent in other ways. And she was highly stressed. So her anxiety was high. She was insecure financially. We were insecure about a lot of things as a household. And there was an undercurrent of anger. And my dad had a lot of that going on too. So collectively, we were like a pile of mess. And so for me, learning attachment, what was true for me was that I needed to do a lot of work on myself in order to have secure attachment in my relationship. And 10 years in, I feel like I'm still working on it. Like, I don't think this is something that just ends and you have your certificate of I am securely attached. I think it's something that we can always work on and have consistency in that. All right, we're going to head to our next commercial break. You're listening to The Pleasure Zone here on Inspired Choices Network, and we'll be right back after this commercial.
Are you secretly a voyeur, wondering what's going on in other people's sex lives? What if now is the time for a totally different sexual evolution? Are you interested in people who are pioneers of different sexual and pleasurable practices? Lean in now with Milica Jelenic, where she will entice you and your body to know your own pleasure zone. On the Pleasure Zone radio show with sensual movement artist Milica Jelenic, you'll receive tools, inspiration, and a foundation to allow yourself to receive more in your sex life, and quite possibly other areas of your life as well. Listen for The Pleasure Zone with Milica every Monday at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, 7 p.m. Central Time, 6 p.m. Mountain Time, and 5 p.m. Pacific Time on InspiredChoicesNetwork.com.
Interested in masturbating for money, copulating for consciousness, and pleasuring on purpose? 21 Days of Sexual Magicism with sensual movement artist Milica Jelenic is an exploration of tools, processes, and actions that you can use to create more for your life, your body, your money inflows, and so much more. Graduated learning for all levels of interest. Learn at your own pace via video classes or join the yearly live class. Take a peek at www.milicajelenic.com.
How wonderful would it be to carry your favorite Inspired Choices Network host with you throughout your day? Well, now you can. Inspired Choices Network now has its very own mobile app. Our free app offers live streaming shows, along with thousands of podcasts and TV episodes. Our shows cover a wide variety of topics. Whether you're waking up with us, carrying us through the day, and taking us to bed with you, we're always here for you to enjoy. We're easy to find. Just search for Inspired Choices Network in the Apple App Store or Google Play Store.
This is The Pleasure Zone with sensual movement artist Milica Jelenic. To participate in the program today, join our live studio audience in our chat room at InspiredChoicesNetwork.com. You can also make the choice to ask or comment by email, info@MilicaJelenic.com. Now, back to the program.
Welcome back, my sweet pleasure seekers. We are talking about all kinds of things to do with intimacy. And in the show, in the show description, there is a word called primal trust. I just want to let you guys know that term is actually trademarked. So I do want to recognize that. I think that, we trademark a lot of things on this planet, but there's an essence and an energy about that term that's just very true and real about having that primal instinctual, we could call it instinctual instead if we want to really refer to it on the show and not get fined. We'll call it instinctual, innate, trust. So where does it come from, and how do we get to a place of trust when we've been in relationships that are confusing? So a lot of getting to the place of trust is getting into a place of getting a new, kind of like a new memory set happening in your brain, creating a new dialogue that happens in your head, rewiring your brain so that you can actually have. So the idea is that if you have new thoughts, they create new neurons, and those new neurons, when they fire together, they wire together, which means that you'll create new neural pathways. So having new stories, we'll say, to tell yourself, you can actually create and train your brain to feel more secure, to feel happier, and to have trust. If you keep telling yourself the same old story, I will be abandoned, this will happen, then those old neural pathways are firing all the time, creating that connection and telling you that you are going to be abandoned and be alone and blah, blah, blah. However, if you rewrite that story, rewire your brain and get new neural connections, you can start to have things like one of the bodies of work I like working with is called the mastery systems. And one of the things you do is reframing. And one of the reframes would be, I trust me. I trust the God in me. I trust the universal life force in me, whatever term you want to use for something greater than you. I trust that in me. I trust me. I trust God. I trust the God in me. So you can play with some things to start to reframe. And that gets you kind of into a mode where you go, oh, wait a second. I'm allowed to do that. I'm allowed to trust. I don't have to live in fear, and I don't have to live in anxiety for the rest of my life. What? So that's a really fun thing to do. So there are a lot of different bodies of work that can help you reframe your brain, from EFT tapping, EMDR. There are different somatic breath work techniques you can use. There's play work you can do. If you have never read, there's a book called, let me just think of this for a second. The Body Keeps the Score. Can't remember the author right now, but The Body Keeps the Score is kind of like listening to scholarly letters on trauma. And because there's a lot of research in the book, and some people find it dry, I find it fascinating. I love listening to the research. I actually have it on audio because I prefer, and I'm an audio learner, not everybody is. So when I listen to it, I can retain the information better. But if you're somebody who likes to read, then absolutely read away. And then you will be able to retain that information for you. And sometimes it's like watching videos on it will help you figure that out as well. So why do we want to change the trauma? Like, what's the benefit of changing the trauma? Is so that you no longer have a fear of intimacy. And the fear of intimacy can even be a fear of, oh my God, I'm afraid to know who I am. What if all these people who had abused me in my life, whatever people who were, in my sphere of reality who were abusive, what if I was like them? And if I'm like them, as long as I hide that, it won't come out. But if I start to get intimate with myself and I start to see those things, what's going to happen? Am I going to hate myself? And then you start to realize, oh my God, I actually already don't like myself because I'm not even willing to see myself. So, we're cute and we have these like tendencies to avoid things until it's like the brink of necessity to change them. And then we start to change them. So Oh, yeah. So why do we change through the traumas? And the traumas can be happening in different ways and create different responses, later on in the way that you have relationships. So let's throw a few out there just so you can be aware. So the 4 attachment styles, we're going to just go through them, what traumas may have occurred, and how, because of those traumas, what you might be experiencing in your life. With secure attachment, there isn't a lot of necessarily trauma that happens in your life. You'll feel, generally the child will be somebody who is secure, explorative, and happy. And generally the mother or the primary caregiver is quick to respond, sensitive, and consistent. And generally when the child grows up to an adult, they have belief and trust that their needs will be met. And then you might have avoidant attachment, where as a child, you might not be very explorative. You might be one of those kids who you just kind of sit and stare at things. And a lot of times what's interesting is that people find kids who have secure attachment, who are super explorative, they find them like nuisances, like, oh, they're running around, they're doing everything, they're in the way, blah, blah, blah. Can't you just sit, blah, blah, blah. But they're actually so secure and they feel secure in their environment that they can do that and that they'll be safe. And there's avoidant attachment, where the child is generally not very explorative and can be super emotionally distant, like emotionally distant to everyone, including the primary caregivers. And when they're not very explorative, they aren't the kind of kids who are feeling safe about doing anything that could be, make a mess or do anything like that. So they become very, at this point, what happens is the parent's response to the child, so the child's not very explorative, it's just the kid just sits there, and then the parent is being distant and disengaged. So it's one of those things where here's a scenario, is like a kid is sitting on their laptop all day long and the parents are sitting on their own laptops being totally disengaged. And so nobody's even discussing or even maybe even in the same room with each other. And so what happens when you grow up is that you start to subconsciously believe that your needs probably won't be met. So even though that sounds like, oh, big deal, there's just 2 people sitting in rooms, it's like neglect, right? So you feel neglected. You won't feel when you grow up that your needs will be met. The ambivalent attachment is where you've got, generally kids will be anxious or insecure or even angry. As a child, it's like constant anger coming out, insecure, looking for like a lot of feedback or having somebody tell them that they're good all the time, and anxious to the point where everything can create fear in them. So the mother or the primary caregiver's response to a child who is anxious, insecure, and angry is that they're usually inconsistent with the way they react to the child. So if a child is anxious, one day they might be supportive, and the next day they might just go, what's wrong with you? Oh, you're driving me crazy. In The Sixth Sense, the mother's quite ambivalent. She's inconsistent. She can be overly sensitive, and she can also be neglectful of the kid. So you can watch that Sixth Sense and see what that kid's going through. He's highly anxious, he's insecure, and he's angry. So it's really interesting to watch, and you can watch shows and just see what kind of attachment styles people have, and you can kind of relate to them yourself. So with the ambivalent attachment, if that doesn't get switched up, or if you don't change to where you're insecure, you'll feel in your life, you can feel like you can't rely on your needs ever being met. So just like avoidant attachment, you don't feel like your needs will be met. It's subconscious. So you might act in ways that you don't even realize that you're avoiding it. It's like self-sabotage, but not aware of it. Ambivalent attachment is like they're kind of aware of it. They're like, well, I already know things won't be met, so who cares, whatever. And then there's disorganized attachment, where with a child, they're usually depressed, angry, totally passive. So somebody yells at them, they're just like, yeah, okay, and non-responsive. So they might not even respond. They might be like cut off and distant and not being able to respond. So what often is the mother's or the primary caregiver's reaction to a child who is constantly in the state of depression, anger, being passive and non-responsive, is that the primary caregiver might have extreme reactions, erratic reactions. You can't, you have no idea, that term walking on eggshells. It's like you never know what the person's going to be or do or who's showing up. It can feel like you're living with somebody who's bipolar, because you're like, what's happening? It can be kind of scary. And if you are somebody who is like, you are a disorganized attachment style kind of person, you might find in your relationship that you do have extreme erratic reactions. You might feel frightened a lot, and you might respond to a lot of things with more fear than some other people that you know. So the disorganized attachment is one of those things that might occur when you just feel like you have no say. So in the list here that I talked about this show, that I was going to discuss, one of the things I put on this list had to do with the fear of being dominated. And so when you have the attachment style of a disorganized attachment style, you will likely have a fear of being dominated. And if you're dominated, then you might feel depressed and angry and completely without power. And so learning how to step into your power and use your voice when you have disorganized attachment, and just using it in and with people, starting with the word no with disorganized attachment. Starting with no can be magic for somebody who's got that style of attachment, just so you can start standing up for yourself, getting yourself out of depression and anger. Because the anger is usually coming from feeling like you've been stepped all over, but you can't do anything about it, or the abuse has been so extreme and you haven't been able to do anything about it. So saying no, standing up for yourself, and then that is one of the easiest tools for disorganized attachment, I feel. And so as you grow up, one of the things that the child that you would as a child, you might start to feel is you might feel really confused. And you might not have any way of knowing how to ask for your needs to be met. You might feel like, I don't even know how to say that I like this. I don't even know how to say I don't like this. I don't really know how to voice my opinion because I'm afraid that somebody's going to yell at me. And I don't know if they will, and I don't know if they won't, because it's erratic. I can't rely on their reaction. So it can be really confusing, and you might not even feel like you know how to deal with people or how to even get your needs met. So that's when the passivity comes along. And some people are like, oh, you're so passive aggressive. It's because they never had they were never responded to in a way that made sense. Everything was erratic. Yeah. So being dominated can be a huge fear of intimacy. So we're going to head to our next commercial. I'm just like talking my way through commercials. Before we head off to our commercial, next week's show is it normal? We're going to talk about hymen variants. I know. Did you even know there were hymen variants? There are. There really are, and they're fascinating. I'll probably even have a demo for you. So we will come right back. You're listening to The Pleasure Zone here on Inspired Choices Network, and we'll be right back after this commercial.
Are you secretly a voyeur, wondering what's going on in other people's sex lives? What if now is the time for a totally different sexual evolution? Are you interested in people who are pioneers of different sexual and pleasurable practices? Lean in now with Milica Jelenic, where she will entice you and your body to know your own pleasure zone. On the Pleasure Zone radio show with sensual movement artist Milica Jelenic, you'll receive tools, inspiration, and a foundation to allow yourself to receive more in your sex life, and quite possibly other areas of your life as well. Listen for the Pleasure Zone with Milica every Monday at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, 7 p.m. Central Time, 6 p.m. Mountain Time, and 5 p.m. Pacific Time on InspiredChoicesNetwork.com. This is The Pleasure Zone with sensual movement artist Milica Jelenic. To participate in the program today, join our live studio audience in our chat room at inspiredchoicesnetwork.com. You can also make the choice to ask or comment by email, info@milicajelenic.com. Now, back to the program.
Welcome back, my sweet, sweet pleasure seekers. Today we have been talking all about intimacy. And I know it sounds like we've been talking about attachment styles, but they actually go hand in hand. And so in this conversation about attachment styles, we've looked at the four main ones that I have worked with. So we've looked at secure attachment, avoidant attachment, ambivalent attachment, and disorganized attachment. And absolutely, if you're listening to this and you've heard variations, and there are combinations, like you could be avoidant and disorganized, and there are other terms for some of these as well. So just know that this is just one variation, but generally the descriptions of the consistent states in childhood and then the responses by the primary caregiver, along with the reason why maybe these behaviors are happening and the belief behind that. Like, why does a kid not choose to explore? Well, if they believe that their needs won't be met, then they might not even look around to try and create anything or do anything because it won't matter, it won't make a difference. Or why would a kid be insecure and angry? Because they actually feel scared about life and they might not survive if your needs aren't being met. You can't rely that your needs are being met. You might always be on the verge of anxiety and insecurity, right? As you start to hear these, I'm sure they'll make more and more sense to you. And you can probably see them reflecting in your life and the lives of the people that you know. And if you do start to notice that, just note it and go, oh, that's fascinating. Bringing it up to people and going, hey, I think you have this attachment style if people don't even know what attachment styles are, that can just be really confusing to them. And then sometimes they'll feel like you're pointing fingers. So it's more about talking about attachment styles for yourself, to do a self-exploration, to have intimacy with you in order to bring it out to the world. So learning to say no is that really key one when we look at the disorganized attachment style. And then, learning to ask for things and have it be okay if somebody says no to you. So, that would fall under the category of the ambivalent attachment. Like, I don't even think my needs are going to be met. Well, just for fun exploration, you can always go and ask some random stranger to hold a door open for you. And if they do, acknowledge it and go, look at that. I made an ask and I received that. Very cool. So, and if you feel like there's no way that you're ever going to have, it's a subconscious belief that your needs probably won't be met. You can't, sometimes they are, sometimes they're not with avoidant attachment. You might need to experiment with those asks more often. And the CEO of this station, Inspired Choices Network, actually has a program that is called Up Your Ask that was put out several years ago. And there, as far as I know, there will be something similar that comes out in the future that's going to be learning how to ask for things in your business. There'll be some stuff. So keep your eyes and ears peeled for that on Inspired Choices, the show. So under secure attachment, if you believe and trust that your needs will be met, some kids start to act out and act weird. That happens too, because they're just like, I can act like a bitch because it doesn't matter. I'm always going to be looked after. So when kids start to really act out and then that's been made okay, then sometimes they become a little bit jerky as adults and they just think they can get away with anything. But for the most part, it can actually create really kind human beings. So all the attachment styles can have some downfalls to them, but it's good to know what they are, and also good to know that they can change over time, and you can actually develop ways to have different attachment styles. So join us next week for Is It Normal? Hymen Variance.
Thank you for listening to The Pleasure Zone with sensual movement artist Milica Jelenic. The Pleasure Zone returns next Monday at 8 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Central, 6 p.m. Mountain, and 5 p.m. Pacific on InspiredChoicesNetwork.com. We hope you'll join us. Until then, have the best week of your life by choosing to be turned on and tuned in to your body.